What's up, everyone, and welcome into a special edition of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Calgary Roughnecks associate digital producer Riley Pollock. Riley, thanks for jumping on with us. How's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be on today.
Oh, perfect. So, I've started this series trying to get more eyes on the sport, especially the Bandits, because that's who we cover. So, trying to do something like the NFL or the NHL or any of those teams do, covering a team and getting somebody on that covers the team next on the Bandits schedule. So,
Mhm.
we've had the Seals, we've had the Rush, and now we got the Calgary Roughnecks. Now, I've asked this question to everybody I've had on so far. In one word, what would you describe the Roughneck season so far?
I think the best descriptive word is roller coaster right now for the Roughnecks. I mean, they've had huge comeback wins. They've crushed Las Vegas, where I thought is maybe the best game I've seen them play in my 4 years with the team. There's been some letdown games as well. Ones that you kind of need that they haven't been able to get up for, but. Yeah, roller coaster is definitely the number one word that comes to mind when you ask me that.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask me last year covering the Bandits, because we're going into our fourth year as well, I think roller coaster probably would have been it. But last year the team finished 8-10, that giant group, and just missed the playoffs. And a lot has changed since then. You had Christian Del Bianco who's holding out. You got Josh Courier and Dan Taylor who are now free agents. Thomas Hogarth, Shane Simpson, Zach Curry were all traded, and even Jeff Cornwall signs with Vancouver in the offseason. But you get Curtis Dixon and Dane Doby back. You draft Cam McLeod and Matthew Gauthier in the dispersal draft, and just last week Nick Rose comes in and over a trade. So the team's sitting 6-6. A lot of people towards before the season started, I think a lot of them picked the Calgary Roughnecks to probably finish towards the bottom of the standings, and
Hmm.
I'm as guilty as anybody else, and happy to be proven wrong. But this team is just littered with veterans right now, and kind of speak to how important it is to have a veteran team and have veteran pieces like a Curtis or a Dane that have pretty much seen everything in the league and kind of know what it is to win when most people might have counted them out before anything even began.
Yeah, I mean, head coach Josh Sanderson has talked about it a lot. He wanted to change the vibe in the locker room a little bit, bring those more veteran guys in, and let the players control the locker room, kind of be the bosses of their own group on and off the floor. So I think you can't really get much better than Curtis Dixon and Dane Doby, who have won championships, have played together, for their whole careers, have been in Calgary before, know what it takes to win in Calgary. So it was huge to get those guys in the lineup, and John Lintz as well, who's a veteran, and he's injured. He's injured right now, and I think that's been a blow to them because he is a vocal leader on that group. He's leading the high five line when the guys are running out onto the floor and talking to each guy individually. So all those veterans that they've brought in, I think it couldn't have been a better fit for guys like Doby, Dixon, and Lintz to kind of help with the transition of this group, because there's a lot of young guys on that back end right now, especially for the Roughnecks, and you need those veteran leaders to kind of help them get their sense of what professional lacrosse is like.
Yeah, I think the word you use there, transition from the old regime into what's going to be coming. I think having veteran pieces like you just mentioned is perfect. But the offense is loaded. I mean, it's one of those things that I did mention before the offseason that I thought this offense could be better than what we saw last year. And you got Dixon and Adobe who are pretty much turning back the clock on what we have seen so far this season. King continues to be one of the most underrated players that just goes out and does his job and really isn't talked about enough around the league. You got, Pace back after a brief one game absence to start the season, and even Tanner Cook is cooking. I mean, what makes this offense so dangerous sitting fourth in the league in scoring?
I think you mentioned it. It's the versatility of this group. I mean, you try and take one person out of the game plan, and there's four or five others that can put up 4 or 5 goals in a game. I believe there's one game where three players had 10 or more points this year, and it it seems like Curtis is getting his points almost every game, and then it's kind of the two or the three or the four in points after that rotates a little bit, and it kind of just depends who has the hot stick that game. I mean, Hayden Dixon just had his first career 4 goal game a couple of nights ago, and Dobie, you've seen a few crazy games from him, 8 straight goals early in the season, and stuff like that. And yeah, Cookie probably had his best game of the year against Colorado when things maybe weren't going so well offensively. Tanner Cook stepped up and got a hat trick and added two helpers as well. So it is really the versatility and the ability of this group. If one guy isn't going, someone else can step in there and take over for the night.
Yeah, that seems to be some of the most dangerous offenses around the league is they're just so deep. It doesn't matter who's going off that night. If one person's having an off night, there's another guy that can be relied upon. And you spoke to the youth on this team a bit earlier, and they get Braden Maya fifth in the draft. You get Jake Follows in the 10th. I'm sorry, the 10th pick in this past draft class. Now Follows has played in 11 of 12 games. You got Maya, who's been playing sparingly 5 of 12. What have you liked from those two rookies as an added piece to a veteran laden team so far?
I mean, for Maya, he's basically playing where Dane Dobie plays, right? So it's going to be great for him to learn from Dane Dobie and King and
Right.
guys like that on the left side. He hasn't been in all the games like you mentioned, just under half. But when he does get in there, he's physical. He's not afraid to shoot the ball. He scored some highlight reel goals that I don't think a lot of rookies would take those opportunities. But he's confident and he's going to be a really good player. They're just stacked on that left side right now. I mean, him and Matthew Gauthier have kind of been alternating in and out this season, and Goats does so many good things off the ball that and he plays with Jesse in the summer in Victoria as well. So um, they both bring their own things. They're splitting it a little bit, but for Maya, he's going to be so good. And then on the back end, Jack Follows. I don't know if there's one bad thing I can say about him. He gets better every single game. He's a little undersized for a defender, but he's very physical for his size. He's not afraid to get in there. And I think as a first year defender, it's tough. Like it is not easy to come out of college or junior lacrosse and step right in and, like you mentioned, play 11 out of 12 games. So I think he's done everything the coaching staff has asked of him, and he's been really really solid so far on the back end.
Yeah, it's always nice, especially with the forward group, when you're that deep at a certain position that you don't have to rush guys in.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it. It's not a bad thing to learn from a guy like Dane Dobie and take some lessons there, especially stuff that happens off the field. But let's turn our attention to the back end. You
Mm-hmm.
lost Zach Courier, lost Shane Simpson. Obviously, that hurts the transition game. The days of CDB hitting Simpson in stride are kind of behind us, and they're working to find their identity. And I think one guy that has come out and has thrived is Bennett Smith. I mean, he only appeared in 9 games last year as a rookie, but year two, I think he's been one of your best players on the back end, maybe one of the best on the team in general. So, what area of his game do you think has taken the biggest step this season?
It's tough to just pick one. He's been so
Right.
good, but he he's his confidence has grown a lot this season. Like I just mentioned, as a rookie, it's tough to come into this league, but now he's kind of had to step up into a bigger role because that back end is so young, and he's getting down the floor a little bit more and taking those shots that maybe he wouldn't have taken last year. He's an athletic guy, so when he can get down the floor and fire away, it's a nice sight to watch because, like you mentioned, the transition has been in transition this year for the Roughnecks. So, and I think he's physical. He's got a bit of an edge to his game too that maybe we didn't see as much last year. He just got in his first fight a couple weeks ago in the NLL, and he plays tough down in the defensive zone and is able to move the ball up the floor. So, his confidence and definitely his physicality have taken a big step this year.
Yeah, it's always nice when you see another element of a young player's game that you might not have thought, hey,
Mm-hmm.
they just have another piece here that make them that much more dangerous. And, another player that has taken a big step is Justin Inacio. And I think it's not just because of his face-off game, which I think has taken another big step. And I think he's one of the tops in the league, sitting at nearly 63% so far. And that's not a small sample size either. But he's being trusted more on the back end. A
Mm-hmm.
former first-round pick in 2021 and a guy who can win the draws, but it can also play on the back end, to me is a massive advantage because there's not a ton of them in the league. Speak to how important it is for Calgary to have a guy that can be as dominant as he has been at the dot, but also can be relied upon on the back end. Because if you can save a roster spot and not have to have just strictly a Fogo on your team, I think that gives you a massive advantage around the league.
Yeah, and he works at it every single day because he's not taking a regular shift on D still, but he does get back there and help out. And if you ask him, he wants to be that everyday guy. He's not happy with just being a face-off guy. So he wasn't happy with his season last year. He says that he knows he was way better than what he showed last year. So he just worked, and he had a healthy off season, which he hasn't had since coming into the league. And he just when you talk to him, you can just see in his eyes how bad he just wants to be the best. And so far this year, he's up there around the top. And you can probably ask him with this as well. He's not satisfied. So he wants to win every single draw. He's battling for every single ball. And yeah, it's been fun to watch because I know how bad he wants it. So
So last, oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No, this season's just been a joy to watch with JI because of just the attitude that he has with this group.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the battle between him and Farrell on Saturday,
Hmm.
and even the adjustments they make because it's back to back, which we'll dive
Hmm.
into in a second. But last one before looking forward to that Bandits Roughnecks matchup, the goalie position. Obviously, Christian Del Bianco is irreplaceable. It's you can't replace him. He's one of one. But they bring in a Cam McLeod in the dispersal draft. You traded up to get him. He gets the first crack at it. I think this is his real first shot in between the pipes, and not just his real first shot. You're replacing a legend in the sport. That on top of everything else, putting on a Roughnecks jersey in between the pipes, you think of Christian Del Bianco at first. So that's already the added pressure that he had on even before playing in a game. Then they sign a go Abrams, and then finally last week, like I mentioned earlier, they swing a deal to bring in defending goalie of the year Nick Rose, and that more is to stabilize the position. And now it might take a bit for the defense to kind of figure out what shots Rosie wants, but how massive is it and how big of a confidence booster is it in that room to kind of bring in a guy when you're sitting 6-6, you got a shot at playoffs? How big of a confidence booster is it from the leadership group saying, "Hey, we believe in you. We think this is the missing piece maybe to go on that playoff run and go out and get a guy like Nick Rose."
Yeah, I think if you're a guy in that locker room, you got to feel like this group, this management and coaching staff has faith in you. And not many reigning goalies of the year get traded for mid-season, nonetheless. So it's a big move, and you give up a guy like Robert Hudson, who's been a solid defender and a first-round pick in 2026. So you paid to get it, but it's huge for this group. And in Colorado, there was two guys who had never played with the Roughnecks on that back end, and then Kalen Mander, who's been sparingly used so far this year. So really, three fresh faces in that D group and a new starting goalie. So in that first quarter, you give up five, and it seemed like maybe they were a little bit. They didn't have the full chemistry, but then they gave up six the rest of the way. So I think even in game, you saw
Right.
that group get even better with each other. So that was a big step there. And I mean, I thought Nick Rose he gave them a shot to win on Saturday against Colorado, and in his first game I'm sure there was some jitters and not really knowing the guys. So hopefully the Roughnecks can get Bennett Smith back into the lineup this week against Buffalo, and they can just continue to build through practice and through games in game one against Buffalo this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Toronto to Calgary, where you spent nearly your entire career and around the same players, it's a bit of a shakeup when you're
Hmm.
playing in front of different guys that might have different tendencies. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think after the first quarter, only letting in six, I thought the in-game adjustments, like you mentioned, it was top notch. But Bandits versus Roughnecks, part one. Calgary comes to Buffalo first on this Saturday. They're sitting 6-6, sixth place in the standings. Rose has seen Buffalo a handful of times in his career.
Yeah, a few
So,
times.
yeah, just a couple. But I know it's not the reason that you would trade for a guy like that, but down the stretch, how important is it to get that little bit extra info on a team that you typically might not see very often?
Well, I mean, for Nick Rose, he's got to have the book on the
Right.
forwards on Buffalo, right? And like whether it works every game or not, I mean, Buffalo's going to get theirs. Their offense
Right.
is unbelievable, but uh, I think he can help the defense a lot because he's already seen them twice this year, and so many times playoffs last year a couple times. It seems like you guys are always playing Toronto, but yeah, I think it's huge. I don't know like if it's a game changing thing, but any little bit that you can have in your advantage, I think, is huge, especially against the back to back defending champions and the best team in the NLL right now. I think you'll take whatever you can get.
So back-to-back weekends facing off against the same team. Buffalo just did it a couple weeks ago versus San Diego. Do you personally think it's better to play the first one at home or the first one on the road?
I don't know. I think maybe on the road first might be nice if you can get the win, right? I mean, if
Right.
you can pull out a road win in game number one and then go back to Calgary, which we're expecting over 15, 16,000 in the building for the St. Patrick's game that night. So it'll be close to what you guys get on a regular basis. So there's going to be some big crowds both ways in the next 2 weeks. So I think if the Roughnecks can find a way to pull one out on the road and build some confidence, and kind of prove that Buffalo is this beatable team, because for the first 6 or 7 weeks this season, I don't think anyone was sure they were ever going to lose. So I think they have to have a great start on the road and then use that momentum to come home and play in front of the biggest home crowd they'll have all regular season. So if you can win that road game, I think being on the road is nice first.
Yeah, that's the way I was thinking too. Is if you get that first win, it's nice going back home, and then you have that home crowd behind you. But
Mm.
if you do lose, you still have that comfort of okay, we can still split this series because we're
Yeah.
back home. So
Yeah.
just a couple more for you here. Obviously, with just 6 games remaining, each game is that much bigger, especially with how close the standings are right now, from like 6 to 11. I don't know if there's any separation between those teams. Is there an area of this game that you believe the Roughnecks might try to get that leg up on Buffalo in order to pull out that road win?
It's tough. I mean, you look across the board at Buffalo and they're strong everywhere, but I mean, we've talked about it. This offense for the Roughnecks should, if there was somewhere offense, defense, goaltending that maybe there's an advantage just on the depth of it. And I'm not saying for sure that there is, but the depth of the Roughnecks offense, I think they want to move the ball around quickly and, maybe jump out to a lead on Buffalo, because if it seems like Buffalo falls down a few times in games and then is able to climb back in it, and so if the Bandits can get a lead early, I think it's going to be tough for the Roughnecks to battle back. So I think that offense needs to come out, go toe to toe with the Buffalo offense, and just outscore them in that first quarter, first half, and just see what happens the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think it's been the last 4 games Buffalo's dropped a first quarter deficit every single time, and they've been
Yeah.
able to battle back, except for the one versus San Diego in overtime. But yeah, if you can build out that advantage and kind of work that back end on defense, which they're down Spanger and Robinson, that might be the recipe that you can pull up the upset victory on the road here. But the last one for you before I let you go. I never ask anybody score predictions because it's near impossible feat to do. But I am going to ask, what type of game do you think we'll see in this one? Do you think it's more of a slow, low-scoring game, or do you think it's going to be one of those high-flying scoring battles to see, okay, who can reach 15 or 16 goals first might pull this one out?
I Everything in me tells me that it's going to be like an 11-9, 11-10 type of game. A little bit lower scoring. Both goalies are very good, but both offenses are very good. So it's hard for me to say something like that. But in
Right.
my heart, I just think it's going to be one of those 11-9, 11-10 games one way or the other. And then maybe when we go back to Calgary, it's one of those 17-16 or 16-15 type of games.
Yeah, I think we all picked a higher scoring game. I even said it on the broadcast versus Saskatchewan and Buffalo last week. They're like, I
Mm.
hope you took the over. And then it was like, I hope you didn't listen to him and took the under. But Riley, thank you for joining us on the Buffalo Sports Collective. Do you want to let everyone know where you can find you and your content that you put out for the Roughnecks?
Yeah, all my stuff's on the Roughnecks website, calgaryroughnecks.com, and on their socials at NLO Roughnecks. And then personally, I'm at Riley Pollock 21 on Twitter is probably the best, or X, sorry, is the best place to find me for my personal stuff.
Well, all right. Thank you for joining us here in the BSC, Riley. I really do hope that we can talk again down the road and continued success with the Roughnecks.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm coming down to Buffalo this weekend, so maybe we can catch up.
Oh yeah, I'll be up in the press box. So yeah, we'll meet
Perfect.
up then.
All
Perfect.
right. Sounds
Well,
great.
but we'll be back Friday for our normal episode to preview Bandits versus Roughnecks. We'll talk to you all then.